Disney theme park characters. Have there been situations where you had to break character? What was the reason? Consequences? Maybe someone who actually played Tarzan can confirm this for me. Disneyland used to have a Tarzan character, but you don't see him anymore, since the characters are always expected to pose for photos and selfies. And Tarzan wore nothing but a loincloth. Women were constantly grabbing the actor's ass when they got in close. So, the park just quit that character. On a Disney cruise I met a guy who looked exactly like Peter Pan. When we asked him, he said, "No, Peter Pan has brown eyes," or something like that. The next day when we went to get a picture with Peter, he got super close and whispered, "See, Peter has brown eyes." Hands down best Disney employee I've ever met. He was also Pluto. If they can't break character, does Rapunzel get to hit perverts with a frying pan? I hugged the snot out of Stitch a couple of years ago and I'm pretty sure that I heard a squeak. If you're reading this, friend of Stitch, I'm very sorry for hugging you so hard. Worked at the Disney store in late '87 and '88 in Orange County, CA. I think, at the time, it was like one of only a handful of stores open. The back of the store had a big screen, where we constantly played some Disney video. Every once in a while, the biggest, muscular, blackest, gayest dude would come in and kindly request we play anything Pooh related. He'd then proceed to prance around the store. He came in the evenings, towards closing, and sing the Tigger parts of either dialogue or any song. Turns out he was one of the Tiggers at Disneyland. Dude just loved being Tigger. A few days ago, me, my sister and her friend went to the new Galaxy's Edge area. My sister's friend was around 6 feet 1 inch and had never seen Star Wars. We were walking around and Chewbacca ran up to her. He was around her height, and hugged her. He put his hand above his head, showing they were both tall. She was super embarrassed, and while we were walking away, he did that fist pump thing. Since then we refer to her as Chewbacca's girlfriend. Seriously, the cutest thing ever. I have a close friend who was Woody for a while at Disneyland. He said that one time the float caught on fire during a show and they had to play it off completely in character. They danced around it and had to quickly get it backstage to deal with the problem, monsieur, he said. They played it off well enough that no one seemed to notice. There wasn't any panic. He said he had never seen an instance of anyone breaking character because everyone was very well trained and there's always at least 6 or so cameras that can see you at all times. I also one time offered an unopened water bottle to an employee when it was near 100 degrees and he said if anyone at Disney saw that, he would be fired. They can't take anything from guests. He also mentioned the cameras constantly watching both crew and patrons. Edit. I texted my friend to confirm and he has given me another story to share. One time an acrobat fell off a float, face planted into the ground and knocked herself out. They had to surround her in a circle and dance in sync as they dragged her body away. They played it off well and apparently no one noticed. Saw a recent video on YouTube of a Ray talking to this little girl and her dad had just started filming. Apparently the story the little girl was telling got Ray laughing so hard she had to turn her face away and eventually got up and ran away because she couldn't stop laughing at whatever the little girl's story was. Super adorable. I was at Disneyland once and the sheriff of Nottingham was fake menacing a child. He reached out to touch the kid's balloon and for some reason it popped. The character actor was clearly stunned. A new balloon appeared less than 30 seconds later. My wife and I went to Disney. We were both 30 and it was my first time ever going to a major theme park. My wife wanted to meet the princesses, so we stand in line and she goes up to get a picture. The Cinderella asks my wife, "Is that your Prince Charming?" My wife said I was. Cinderella asked, "How did you meet?" My wife paused for a second and said, "That story is not Disney World appropriate," and Cinderella laughed like a real breaking character laugh for just a second and caught herself. If she was drinking coffee, it would have been a spit take. Finally she adds, "Oh well, I bet it was romantic anyway." It's not a great story, but seeing her break character for a genuine laugh was my favorite memory from that trip. And for anyone who wants to know, short version, we met at a party. She was topless on a trampoline. I wasn't a character but worked closely with them. As a photographer, Disney performers are trained to never break character for whatever reason. They have ways of signaling their character attendant that they are in distress. And it's generally up to the character attendant to avoid any weird or uncomfortable situations. As far as weird situations, they do get people that stalk them in the park. Like some people get in those lines multiple times to get a photo with a specific performer. The weird side of Disney fanatics or something else. A bit late, but I did the college program at WDW. Never saw a character break when I worked audience control for parades. Definitely saw a few fully costumed characters puke in their heads. And Prince Naveen once got heat exhaustion and managed to leave the parade route fully in character. Once the parade was over, we saw him in the back almost completely passed out. Typically the parade will just speed up to double time if a character actor is in distress. I've seen articles that face characters can leave at any time if harassment is bad. Using in-character excuses. Costume characters always have an attendant with them to control unruly guests. My cousin used to do this when I was a kid. We'd always go try to find her on days we knew she was working. She mostly played Pooh Bear. She would never say out loud, "Hi Nugatuk," quote, but she would get very animated and jump around to give us hugs. Occasionally she'd still say things like, "I have a rumbly in my tummy." I thought I was the coolest kid 'cause I knew Pooh Bear. I wasn't a character but was a cast member. I was walking from backstage into the park. If you've seen the transitions, they're S-shaped to keep people from peeking in. I was pushing a dolly hand cart. The ones we used had two long supports sticking out from the end. As I was going though, Winnie the Pooh was walking in from the other side. I hit her square in the leg with it. Hearing Winnie the Pooh say, "fuck," was a pretty damn funny. I wouldn't say break, but I was a lifeguard and I had to ban this kid from going down the water slide. Every single time I told him he had to be feet first and every time he said, "okay." But he kept going head first and it got to the point where the other kids saw him and were copying him. He left and cried to Mom and Dad and I explained to Mom and Dad why. They left and cried to my coordinator and my cord came back saying that wasn't very magical. I explained after several times of this kid not listening. Other kids were copying him. In any case, I got a stern talk to about being the nice lifeguard who explains why versus the mean lifeguard who just yells orders. Later that day, that kid was running across the deck, despite several requests not to. Tripped and ate concrete. Person shrugging male sign. Don't hate me because I don't feel bad. Wow, they don't mess around with their silence vow, huh? I watched Jack Sparrow talking to a kid when the kid started puking everywhere. He said, "Too much of the ol' apple juice, eh? Been there myself. Even ran out once." Quote. All the while, the kid is just projectile vomiting everywhere. WDW character department at Magic Kingdom many years ago. I can't remember breaking character, but I do remember working the restaurant at the Contemporary for dinners. One time we had a Make-A-Wish kid as a guest and they were just the most awesome kid. And it was just heartbreaking to know why they were there. So our lead let us do a group hangout with the kid for something like an hour in costume. Playing and running around and having fun. You could never play like that in the parks. You'd start a kid riot. No consequences. We just all hoped we made that little kid happy. Bonus fun fact. The Goofy costume for the Electric Light Parade was worn by a float driver. Because the driver was seated, no pants with that costume. Just the glittery top and head and gloves. My neighbor. He died a couple of years ago. So I'm safe in telling this. worked at Disney for years. One day he was stocking shelves in a gift shop and came around the corner and nearly ran into none other than Paul and Linda McCartney. Before he could stop himself, he loudly exclaimed, "Holy shit, it's the McCartneys." Quote, he immediately realized how big of a breach of Disney cast member etiquette he had committed and turned 12 shades of red. But before anything bad could happen, Paul and Linda just smiled and laughed and introduced themselves. Apparently they were wonderfully laid back about such things, and quite used to surprised reactions when people recognized them in public. He didn't get into any trouble. His boss saw the whole episode and thought it was hilarious, and I think they both signed a hat or something for him as they were checking out.